Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Revolutionary Baddies podcast.
Yes.
We are so excited for you to join us. Thank you for joining us for season 2, episode number 8.
Ooh, we're rolling through.
We are.
Mhm.
Our goal right now is to release 26 episodes for season 2. I mean, it's pretty lofty.
I mean, we have such a variety of topics ahead, so
we really do.
We're gonna have some special months dedicated to certain topics, but yeah, we got an exciting season.
Yeah, thank y'all for joining us. Thank you for being with us in this journey, and we are only a few days from Black History Month.
Woo! We need a longer month.
That's what Whitney Houston said, and I believe it.
Yeah.
I always remember Black History Month kind of being a moment at my schools. I grew up, going to Black elementary, middle, high school, and a HBCU. And so it was always like, this is when I really learned some shit. This is when I learned some shit.
That's when they segue to, all right, let's switch it up.
But it was always the same people. It was always Martin Luther King,
Rosa Parks,
Harriet Tubman, maybe like a Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
There was always a athlete thrown in there, but for the most part, it was the same.
Yeah. Frederick Douglass.
Yeah. George Washington Carver. It was generally all the same, 5 to 10 Black people.
Over and over.
So we hope that we bring some new heroes to life.
Yes.
For you and for anybody else in your world that's looking to learn more about just the transformation that Black people have contributed to this entire globe over history.
Yeah. I think, Black history, we have such a narrow focus on like, how do we make these? I think it goes back to just how we study history in general. It's like, this was a period of time for this, a hero came. This was a period of time for this, a hero came.
Yeah.
This was a period of time. And just in general in America, we don't teach history thoroughly.
Yeah.
And so it's very much about these few highlighted people who just kind of saved the day. And so it's definitely our responsibility in understanding history as a whole, and particularly Black history, that we get out of this ideal of like slavery, rough period, abolitionists, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman,
right,
save the day. Like, it was so much work being done throughout all of these periods, whether it's the civil rights movement, with a lot of leaders, a lot of regular people who did extraordinary things.
Right. Yeah. So, happy Black History Month.
Yes.
Turn up.
Let's be Blacker.
How can we be more Blacker, more historic?
Yeah.
But yeah, so we are here in episode 8, and we are going to be talking about a very important organization, which is the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde Islands, also known as the PAIGC.
Yeah. Dee Dee brought this topic to me. I had not heard of this organization, or really didn't know a lot about the fight in this particular country in Guinea-Bissau for independence in West Africa. So this was a delight because I love learning some new things.
Yeah. I mean, last season we brought the Haitian Revolution. That was kind of the first episode where we talked about a revolution, and obviously incredibly important. The first country, the first Black country to win on the Western, on the Western Hemisphere, to win against the colonizers. And so we wanted to bring one that happened on the continent across 2 countries at once. And the leader, Amilcar Cabral, is who a lot of folks know. He's a writer. He was a philosopher, but also a revolutionary guerrilla warfare fighter. And yeah, I'm just excited, especially in the times that we're in. Like just this past, from the time that we are recording this, all of the uprising that's happening in Minneapolis is all up and through our feed. Shout out to Minneapolis.
They are showing. I mean, shout out to them having the fortitude, because in what 5 or 6 year span, less than a 6 year span.
Yeah, this
is their second major fight.
Yeah. And this is in the dead of winter, y'all.
They don't have a winter like
there
North Carolina.
Are hundreds of people outside, maybe in thousands,
negative temperatures
in Minnesota, turning up, getting ice out of their city, disrupting them at their hotels. They are doing all kinds of art focused protests and actions. There's the kids and the high schoolers are walking out of class or walking out of school. It's just a very chaotic time, obviously, in Minneapolis, but shout out to all the ways that they are showing resistance in this particular moment.
Definitely showing more bravery than their leadership.
Hello.
Their mayor, their governor, the governor who was running as vice president with Kamala.
Is that Gretchen?
No. Tim Walz.
Oh, yeah, Tim Walz.
Tim Walz.
I forgot about him.
You know, the people are always stronger than those in government, typically. The Democrats specifically. Who are like very strong, like, ICE, get the fuck out. And then they're also like, hey, people, just go home and ride it out. And it's like, nah, the people like, fuck that. Right. We'll get them out of here.
Right.
So
don't mind if we do.
Power to the people.
Yeah.
And I think, like I say, bringing this topic in this episode, in the previous episodes, we've been talking about what makes a sustainable revolution, what things that we can learn from, what things do we not need, what aspects do we need. And I'm excited to get into the struggle in Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, because I think that there's a lot we can learn about how to organize and how to approach struggle and revolution. I'm a fan. Like I said, Dee brought this topic to the forefront, and I was like, okay, let me get on my Zoom.
Yeah.
And
everybody get on your Zoom.
And you have to get on your Zoom. I'm telling you, like, the more I read, the more I study, the more I'm like, you see, Brittany, you see? Slow it down. You know, like if I would have jumped out and just started talking to y'all, or trying to have a platform, or try to be, educate people politically and about revolution, and I had just read the autobiography of Malcolm X, my politics would not be evolved at all.
Yeah.
And you have to read and study. And the more you study real revolutionaries, you're like, all right, bring it in.
Right.
You know, because I know a lot of people out there right now are like, it's time to get the guns and suit up. And I think, hey, go ahead. You got the money, go ahead and buy one. But buy a book on the way home from the gun range.
Just a couple.
Get a couple books, and maybe get a politic to go with the power that you plan to exert via the rifle. You need both. And I think we'll get into that in this episode for sure. So yeah, I'm excited.
I mean, the main thread that we are always going to speak to is to encourage the masses to read more.
You have to. For yourself.
Literally.
Listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
But Dee does an excellent job on every episode of linking almost everything we talk about.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
If you don't know where to start, go in the comment sections on your streaming platform of your choice. If you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and please click those links and think about checking those books out from your library, buying them, watching the documentaries, reading the essays, because it's important to listen to people who have read these subjects and to get an ideal, but it's also important to read and decipher this information
for yourself. Yeah, absolutely.
You can't listen to everything everybody say.
Absolutely. I value the wisdom of others.
Yes.
And that's why all of the resources are linked. Every book we mention, some things are linked more than once. One thing about Brittany,
You look at it and bring it today.
She gonna bring up Huey P.
to die for the people.
And she gonna bring up Kwame and Nkrumah. I mean, Thomas Sankara.
Thomas Sankara and Kwame, I did bring up in season 1. And I actually was reading his book yesterday, Stokely Speaks. It's another...
I know you was.
Fire one.
Yes.
But yeah, go in and check those out. They are brought back up for a reason.
Yeah.
It's multiple essays on multiple things.
Yeah. So just to give you all a kind of lay of the land of where we're talking about. So Cape Verde, and at this point in history, it's not called Guinea-Bissau, it's called Portuguese Guinea. Both of these countries are ruled by the Portuguese colonizers, and they live on the western side of Africa, and Guinea-Bissau is about the size of Wales.
Yeah. And
it's a very flat geography. And Cape Verde is essentially a collection of islands. And this kind of covers the western part of the western coast of Africa. Both of these countries were ruled by Portugal for at least 500 years. And the abolishment of slavery came to specifically Cape Verde in 1864. However, it was still a country that was ruled by Portugal. So that meant a lot of things, a lot of deprivation, a lot of exploitation, even though it wasn't enslavement, by legal process. It was still very much forced labor, forced taxes. 95% of the population in Portuguese Guinea were peasants and farmers and illiterate people. Mm-hmm. And then Cape Verde, because it's a collection of islands, primarily was used as a port for the Portuguese, but a port not necessarily for imports, exports, but more for, it was like a kind of like a stopover spot during the transatlantic slave trade and during, and even post that. Cape Verdeans, while there was some different classes of people in Cape Verde, they were not allowed to own any nautical vessels. So they couldn't do any fishing, and they couldn't do any imports or exports of their own in that island. And so 100% of the dependency of food really rested on the Portuguese colonizers, mm-hmm. which meant that in Cape Verde, they experienced, over centuries, multiple times of extreme famine. And obviously that leads to a lot of deprivation across the country, but also specifically the soil erosion and mismanaged farms and the forced labor, the forced taxes, and the hunger and starvation that actually existed during those years with the Cape Verdeans. And so they kind of, sometimes in history, they owe the famine to droughts and kind of make it as if it's a non-man-made problem. But actually some of the most devastating famine experienced in the 1940s in Cape Verde claimed 45,000 people's lives. And so this is kind of the conditions that both of these countries, neighboring countries, are under. And they also didn't have many opportunities for education. In Cape Verde, there were only 45 schools across the entire country. There was no college or university for Portuguese Guinea people or Cape Verdeans at that time. And so very, very high illiteracy rate and forced labor, forced taxes. They're not able to own nautical vessels, which would have compensated for the amount of hunger that they had. They weren't able to get seafood and stuff like that. Yeah. And so, just a very kind of destitute conditions that these Black folks are living in under Portuguese rule.
And it's important when we talk about colonialism to understand that it looked different across Africa. Mm-hmm. And of course, Latin America and Asia as well. Even though they were all being colonized by a handful of powers.
Right.
The British had a different philosophy for how they ran their colonies. The French had a different philosophy, and the Portuguese had a different philosophy, and the Dutch and the Spanish.
Yeah.
And so what is important is like not having a blanket viewpoint of what a colonial situation looked like. Like the French had a more mentality of civilizing the people and bringing them up to French culture and values. So while they were still very brutal, they wanted to teach them in certain ways, obviously not fully make the population literate, because that's not the goal of any person in a dominant group.
Right.
But they, it's a different mentality about really wanting to keep the people completely in the dark, completely ignorant, versus wanting to teach them the things that you want them to know, to be a quote unquote more civilized person.
Indoctrination.
And what access you give them to being able to come to France and be educated, and creating a certain class within the subordinate people, the African peoples, like creating an administrative class.
Right.
And having, the peasants. So the Portuguese mentality was, in these particular colonies, was particularly brutal. And it was no real investment in like the infrastructure of these countries.
Yeah, not at all. And so obviously, eventually, there were some regular people that were like, we need to fight for the liberation and independence of our countries, actually. And that is what kind of birthed the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde Islands, the PAIGC. So speaking specifically of now the time that we're in, we're talking about the 1950s. So, and this was founded by Amilcar Cabral, who is trained in Lisbon. He becomes kind of one of the first Cape Verdeans, kind of in the first class of Cape Verdeans that were able to go to university in Lisbon. And he was trained as an agricultural engineer and learned a lot. Obviously, while he's like outside of his country, learning how to read. He's reading Marx. He's reading lots of different things.
And then he linked up with individuals from other Portuguese colonies, from Mozambique and Angola. And that's when they started kind of having these conversations about like, how do we want to, like, what do we want to take back to our country?
Right.
And how do we want to fight? And, when I was reading about him, he talked about, I forget the gentlemen's names that he met and organized with, but how they all kind of had this vigor to go back to their country and build liberation movements.
Yeah.
Because they had the one common enemy, which was the Portuguese government.
Right. And so it was like, this was that moment of like, I mean, think of it as like, the different Avengers before they were Avengers, all ending up going to the same schools at the same time, and recognizing just how similar the struggles and the fights actually were, and being African people at the same time. And at this point, there was just being brewed this sense of African solidarity, African unity was becoming more and more popular during this time. This was during all of the independent
very
fights.
Revolutionary era, decade.
Yeah, especially in for the continent. This was when Ghana was gaining its independence, and Senegal was gaining its independence, and just these other countries that were fighting for the liberation of their country and this sense of African unity against the European colonizers. This is 1956. So there were still a lot of African countries that were under European rule. Amilcar Cabral was one of the founding members of this organization. And originally, before they even got in the mix for real, they actually tried to meet and negotiate with them.
Yeah. And they found that the Portuguese had a lot of empty promises. They were going to pilot these programs where they were going to become more multicultural, more invested, were more opportunities for education to bring people to, Lisbon and be able to learn. And they found that all of it was just empty. And none of it was direct plans for the liberation of the people.
Right.
And I loved, as I, was studying him, that he was like, what's the plan, Stan? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want a lot of ideals. I don't want a lot of fluff policy.
Right.
Tell me directly what it is that you can offer us. Even when he went to the UN, I was reading one of his speeches at the UN. I need to know direct plans of contribution. Right. And after years of
rightfully so.
Yeah, because people's lives are being affected right now.
Yeah.
So this whole rollout policy of I don't know, we can kind of make things the offer of diversity, we don't need that.
Right.
We need people to no longer be exploited. And so once those negotiations failed and they saw the brutality increasing, it kind of left them with no other option but to say that we are going to have to take our liberation.
Yeah. Yeah. So they began doing the work. I mean, it's kind of like the Portuguese, I don't know if they underestimated them. Definitely. I mean, I'm sure they did, but definitely didn't expect the guerrilla warfare that went on. And the fight that went on as long as it did, and how strategic and skillful these people were. A big part of the party too was, again, this is across 2 countries.
Yeah.
And so that means that there's actually many different tribes that are coming and joining these forces. And they really fundamentally, a big part of Cabral's philosophy was also employing on the soldiers that we are fighting the Portuguese colonialists. We're not fighting the Portuguese people. And that, in fact, it is also part of our role to explicitly support the Portuguese people and not the Portuguese colonizers. And so just kind of strategically framing for the people that there's a way that we can have some discernment about what's happening, and what we don't want is after we win, because Cabral was like, it's inevitable.
Yeah, it's coming. He had a lot of confidence. We will win it.
Yeah.
That's how he spoke. Not if we win this thing.
Absolutely not.
When we will this thing, it's inevitable that we win.
Yeah, he's like, because this is the only way forward. Is us
no
getting
compromise.
getting the independence of our people, and you motherfuckers have it, and we are going to get it. And when we do, we need to make sure that the people in Portugal, the Portuguese people outside of our countries, know that we were not just killers. We weren't monsters. We weren't savages, was specifically what he said. We're not savages. We are men that are fighting for the independence of our people, period.
Yeah.
I mean, he's king of keeping the main thing the main thing.
Absolutely. And when I was reading his speech at the UN, he really talked about, or this actually might have been a question and answer thing he was at in London, but he was pretty much talking about that the Portuguese were a backwards European power. He's like, they're not doing what the British are doing. They're not doing what the French. He's like, they're pretty much a failing state. Oh. And yeah, he was like, for as long as y'all been running things and as much as y'all been exploited, y'all could be bigger and better than what y'all are.
Right.
Y'all ain't even running shit right in your country. Whereas
right.
France and Britain and Belgium, they were rapidly they were developing literally by sucking the blood
right.
out of Africa.
Right.
And of course I'm paraphrasing it, but he's kind of like the Portuguese are sucking the blood and still not developing their own country properly.
Right.
Which is how you can kind of communicate with the ordinary people of that country to say look what they're doing for y'all. Nothing.
Right. Exactly.
Y'all aren't even really reaping the benefits of being colonial,
right.
Besides a small ruling class.
Right.
And so he, like I say, just continuously impressed by not only the knowledge of the many peoples of his countries, or of the two countries, but of the enemy, and knowing what were their strengths and what were their weaknesses, and being able to sniff out that weakness of the Portuguese. He knew like they are going to have to rely heavily on allies.
Yep.
To be able to defeat us. They don't have the military budget. They don't have the power to keep this up. They definitely can enter the fight and exert a lot of force, but how long can they sustain it when they struggle in themselves?
Yeah.
Very important to know the strengths and the weaknesses, and to understand of your ops, and understand that their weaknesses are real.
Yeah.
You may say, well, they strong. Yeah, they are strong in certain ways, and they are weak, and that is what you attack, is their weaknesses. Exactly.
Just the amount of foresight, again, confidence, and research that had been done. Cabral actually got to spend some time in Portugal, so he also saw the conditions of the people there for himself, and was able to really bring that perspective back in a way that people really trusted. He was 43 years old when he founded this organization, so he wasn't a young student. I know I said student, but he wasn't like a young student when he founded this organization. He was in his mid-40s, but he was very clear on everything that was absolutely necessary. A couple of other things about the party, or the army. There was multiple kind of factions of the PAIGC. And so the army was just one part of it.
Yeah.
But they did many, many other things during this time. But one of the things that I found to be interesting is that they decided to not have any badges or any ranks within the army. They had people that they trusted as commanders, and then everyone agreed that they would be following those people's orders. And these were regular people. Again, 95% of the country is peasants and farmers.
Yeah.
So that's primarily who was the main soldiers, who was the commanders, who were the nurses, who were the people that cooked the food. Many of those folks were trained in guerrilla warfare or many other things outside of the country. This is where the lesson and the charge around international solidarity, global solidarity against imperialism really comes into effect.
Yeah. He definitely said that the Organization for African Unity was a major ally for them.
Yeah.
And, at one point somebody tried to ask him, like, did you get more support from the Northern Arab African countries or Sub-Saharan? He was like, look, we ain't gonna get into all of that. we're getting, the Organization for African Unity. Let's focus on the unity.
Right,
we're getting to the support where we need it. We're getting it from multiple directions. He was like, we're getting it from China. We're getting it from the Soviet Union.
Right.
But he always kept bringing it back. But most importantly, my people here are trained and organized to fight.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
like the support is important, but a quote that I liked from him, which he actually said was like an African proverb, was that rice can only be cooked inside a pot. Meaning that he said you can have fire, you can have the rice, but the rice can only be cooked inside the pot. And he said the struggle has to be carried on inside of the country, and to, avoid any diversions to rely too heavily on neighboring countries, as he thought that the Portuguese would expect, because there's this small country, mostly peasants.
Right.
And so their enemy forces were like, they're going to have soldiers from Senegal, a bordering country,
right.
French Guinea, which is different than Portuguese Guinea-Bissau. And so the Portuguese strategically planned on them heavily relying on others. And they said, we have got to train up our population to all be fighters to some extent, and not just fighters with guns, but building the infrastructure, the political infrastructure, to have, as they won territories, to be building those territories up simultaneously.
Yes.
Which I think is another great lesson when we talk about how to build a better revolution. It's not just what you tear down, but it's about what you're building up simultaneously.
Yeah.
It's very easy to know what you want to get rid of.
Right.
But you can you can get rid of everything.
Yeah.
You can, lightning could drop Trump out of the sky today. God, please. But if you don't have a political organization, a national one, to build the schools that you say you want, the curriculum, the health services,
right,
the development of the women and children, which he acknowledged was the most exploited class in his country, as they are in every country.
Right.
If you're not simultaneously doing them at the same time, one hand has to be the military, the other hand has to be the infrastructure and the political organization
at the same time.
At the same damn time.
Yeah.
And so I love that he said we are a political military organization.
Yeah.
But he emphasized the military part is to just get us through this armed struggle.
Right.
But ultimately, we are a political organization that is looking to build a nation, build a state that can really claim its independence and maintain it.
Yeah.
So if they want a territory, they said, let's get to work on it now.
Immediately.
And it makes it harder for the Portuguese to then come back into it and do just a military defeat, because now they're already building councils and assemblies and educating the people. So a big investment in the actual people of the country, from the rural areas all the way through the towns.
Yeah. And grows the legitimacy of them as an organization. Like, I feel like so much of what's happening in the conversations that you have, especially with just people about the abolition movement, we want to get rid of the police.
Right.
We want to get rid of prisons. And the follow-up question to that is always, well, what is going to be the replacement? And I wish that the abolitionist movement at this point was doing a better job of building those alternatives in a way that isn't so reliant on large funding. Unfortunately, so much of the programs that we would want to build that could address safety and crime and violence in our cities, it's completely underfunded, and it's even more so, depending on who's in power to make the decisions around the budget. And so it kind of stifles our opportunity to dream and imagine and build the things that we actually do want to happen. I'm not saying that those things are not happening. We definitely have some very clear examples, but not nearly enough.
I remember thinking when there was the big, defund the police movement, is that, once again, phrases are important, slogans, because a lot of people hear defund the police and they think that means, okay, just take the money away from the police. The police will no longer exist. And they think that that's the end of the people's plans who are talking about it. Right. And like you said, doing that job of communicating that we're actually talking about reallocating taxpayers' funds into community programs, community safety.
Right.
But you don't hear that. You hear defund the police.
Yeah.
And so even people who are like, fuck 12 are like, all right, so like we get rid of them, but like what are we gonna do?
What I'm gonna do?
What are we gonna do when the nigga with the chopper down the street get to spraying?
They don't say that. They don't even say that. They say what's gonna happen with the rapists, what's gonna happen with the serial killers. It's like the most extreme cases, which are not uncommon, especially in the United States. Especially.
We're the home of the serial killer.
Hello. I get the question. Yeah. But the question also should not just live with the organizers. It actually should live with the person that's asking the question as well.
Yeah.
That is the point.
Yeah. But, what happens here in America is people are just not educated. Mm-hmm. So if you pose the question back to them,
well,
but once again, it goes back to the importance of, or like the genius of Cabral, of like, the ordinary person has to be a part of this political organization. Yes. Has to understand the politics. He was also really big on emphasizing we are not trying to swap out one exploitation for the next.
Yeah, exactly.
We are not trying to get rid of the Portuguese and then all me and my homies come in and now we're the exploiters.
Yeah.
No, this has to be a ground up movement. We have to empower everyone.
Yeah.
And he was like, we don't want to do a skin swap. He literally said that we're not trying to swap skin colors of the hand of the exploiter. And so, no, when you defund the police, you don't want to bring in the Hebrew Israelites with guns.
No, why? How they catch a stray?
I'm saying this because shout out to Chris and X. Deontay had I won't call it a skit because it's his podcast. And he was talking about how we need like a hotline to call 1-800-Hebrews to do policing. He's like, can you imagine them niggas hopping out the van with the frill off their vest? And he was like, they're going to pick up like, hello, you're talking to the real Israelites.
Dang, not they caught a stray.
They caught a major one. He was crackling. Honestly, if I was a Hebrew Israelite, that nigga would have to see me if I caught him. The way he was laughing.
Yeah.
But
making niggas useful.
Yeah.
Is the core of what he's saying, what that black man is saying.
I was like, we can look into that a little bit because it's about community policing, right?
Why not?
But we got to watch the Hebrew Israelites.
We do.
The hotels.
We do. I was trying to explain to my uncle because I have an older sister. And I believe she is Hebrew Israelite. Now, I didn't grow up with her, so I didn't know this until a recent holiday. But I was telling my uncle, and he was like, what the fuck is that? He was just straight up like, he was like, is that Muslim? I was like, nope, it's not. It's not. It's yeah. But what Cabral is saying is not too different from what we said on the Radical Feminist Revolution episode of like when we call for the ending of systemic sexism and patriarchy, we're not asking for a swap out of power.
Yeah. Now women do the abusing and the subjugation.
Yeah.
And now
that's not what we're talking about. So much of what Cabral talked about is really, I mean, humanity is at the core of it. One of the things that he says is he talks about dignity, and that essentially the colonizers are holding the dignity of the people. And that's what we are fighting for. He was like, we're not fighting for, people ask if we're fighting for communism or socialism. He's like, all of that is irrelevant.
Yeah.
The colonizers have the dignity of our people because they hold the independence of our people, and we need that back.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I love that when he was posed the question about, so what is the role of women? He was like, there's a lot of work to be done. And much like the Radical Feminist Revolution episode, he said, with the women as well. He's like, not just with the men, definitely with some of the women who come from certain tribal mentalities. He was like, we would have a lot of people who women were like, I'm ready to take up arms. I'm ready to be a nurse. I'm ready to join in whatever way I can. He said, and then they would get a man and have some babies, and they'd be like, actually, I'm pretty good. And he's like, no, sister, we need you in this fight.
Yeah.
And he said he even had to work on certain attitudes that he had himself and other people in leadership around, what role women should have in this fight, and that they definitely should, because he believed that they were the most exploited class within the country. And so he also talked about understanding the cultural differences between the tribes in his country. So once again, Cabral and the leadership were very keen on doing an analysis of who they were working with.
Right.
You got to know who you're working with in your own forces.
Yeah.
And so he said, like, the certain tribes had very patriarchal mentalities. And so it was a little bit more to kind of get them to understand, like, this is not the way in which we want to build up the revolution in our country. And we have to remove that level of exploitation, like Thomas Sankara was saying in his speech. I'm gonna drop Thomas. And but then he said that there were other tribes where really your power and your worth was determined by your work. And he said women did a lot of the work, so women had a pretty good say in like what went on within their local tribes. And then he said in the Cape Verde Islands, they had matriarchal societies with queens, and not queens just because their father was a king or their husband was a king, they were the queen, and the lineage moved down matriarchal lines. So a queen would birth another queen. So understanding the different dynamics, and that once again, if we want to build revolution here in America or anywhere, one nation, these borders that have been drawn hundreds of years ago, it's a lot of people within every border.
Right.
A lot of different mentalities, a lot of different regional things, structures. And so you have to really know and approach every people on the level that they are on.
Exactly. I mean, another element that feels very specific to this army was that they also didn't salute. They shook hands instead. So whenever they agreed to something or an order was given, they shook hands instead of saluting. And so it made it more informal and more personal. And a big principle of theirs was also that they didn't subscribe to the title of being countrymen. I mean, of being military men. That they were serious about, they are men that are using a military instrument and using a military formation as an instrument to fight for the independence of their people. And the whole plan is that when the independence has been complete, that people would just go back to what they were doing beforehand, or that they would focus on really building the soil of the plans that they have for the independence of their, post-independence plans. And that was the focus. So many different ways that they did not want to mimic what they saw happening in other countries.
Yeah.
They really wanted it to be their style of fighting for the independence of their people. They moved very quietly. It's not a whole lot of people, but they've pretty much only attacked at night. They moved very stealthy and unpredictable throughout the kind of guerrilla warfare years. So the organization was founded in 1956, and by 1962, they had actually covered 2/3 of the country. Again, setting up local and regional government systems which had not existed before. Most of this country is also rural. I mean, I feel like most countries are rural, but most of this country is rural, and they had never had any kind of local or regional government.
Yeah.
But the PAIGC, again, they had different factions. So one piece of it was the military component, but the other piece of it was building this kind of infrastructure in these local regional areas. Again, really deploying this principle around African unity and about fighting for the dignity of the people. They built schools, they built hospitals, they built
cultural centers.
I mean, they literally were building these things as they're also fighting the battles across the country in different parts of the country at this time.
I like that, going back to where he was talking about not swapping out the Portuguese for another class of Africans to be the exploiters. He said, like when they took over some of the leadership or the buildings or homes or palaces, really, that the Portuguese had built, he was like, it would have been, of course, to some people a no-brainer to put the new prime minister, which they didn't have at the time, of Guinea-Bissau, in that home. And he said, no, instead we're going to turning into a health center or a cultural center. So once again, remove that imagery of that.
Right.
People in power. This is where the people in power get to live in a palace.
Yeah.
No, it's not that anymore. He was like, we have to culturally remove what became significant for the Portuguese to have here, and that we can't mimic it anyway. And I think he was looking at some of the failures of other African liberation movements where they're doing this, military coup style takeover for liberation, and they're leaving these military men in power who have no real politics.
Right.
For how they want to run the country, for how they want to improve their country.
Yeah.
They are just now I'm the captain now.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, you know, from, what's the movie, Captain Phillip?
Yeah, the one with the pirates. And
yeah,
Tom Hanks,
in Somalia.
yeah.
And so, like, he was like, we have to be very intentional to move away from that. And like I say, a good lesson in, you know, before they enter guerrilla warfare, before they really boosted up their military arm, was the intensive amount of political organizing that they did to have a national movement, so that when they moved, they were on one accord.
Right.
And so I know right now in this moment, myself included, people are ready to say, like, we're gonna have to go to war to defend ourselves against the regime in our own country. You need to be organized first.
Absolutely. Let's start there.
Yeah, you have to be.
Let's start there.
And so I think that's kind of what's missing in America. I won't even say kind of. Is that there is not, organizations are definitely trying, but there is no real national movement against what we're facing. People are still holding on to the Democrats.
Yeah.
Still looking at it as a Republican versus Democrat type of issue that we're facing.
Right.
So therefore leaving out class analysis, leaving out a lot, really. And of course there are plenty of organizations, but obviously we're a very large nation. We're 150, no, it's like 300. Is it 150 or 300 million of us? Why am I drawing a blank on that? I think it's about 300 million Americans, actually.
Yeah.
It's about 300 million. Much different than a country with less than 3 million.
But you know, this is a bit of a sidebar, but I was having a conversation with some people last night, and they were basically saying that, like, the population amount is like a lie.
What's their theory?
Well, one theory was that people are overcounted, and then another theory was that people are undercounted because there's people that are living like underground.
Okay, how many? What's the like spectrum of, like, are we way over, way under?
I think we might be under. I think there's a lot of people. I think there's more people that are not counted in the census.
Okay, no, I can see that.
I feel like that would make more sense because of the lack of trust that people have in the government. Like, why would people all be counted? And that apparently there are people that literally live underground.
Under the earth.
That's what somebody said.
I mean, I don't take it away.
Like, maybe not in Durham, North Carolina, but like New York or like,
no, for sure. There was
Los Angeles. And I'm thinking like, oh, you mean like, you know, unhoused people? They're like, no.
Underground community.
There's people underground.
Okay, so look, I'm going to mention this because now we're on this train. I don't have it verified, but I did see online where they found this underground community of like, what do you call them?
The
Orthodox Jewish men.
The Hasidic Jewish people
living underground. It was some real dirty mattresses and a lot of questionable things, maybe about child trafficking or whatever. And they was literally, it's videos and pictures of them coming from up under the ground when they were raided. And that story kind of disappeared. I got a homeboy. He keeps that story fresh on the timeline. Why? Now I don't know. Right. So no, I can understand. I could definitely see that. So
yeah,
that's one of the conspiracy theories that and once again I pay attention to conspiracy theories because there's a little bit of truth in some. Yeah, in some, not all.
I mean, yeah,
you gotta, it's like, what you mean by that?
Right.
Look into it.
No, I this is a new one. I'm not really a conspiracy theory girl, so when I hear the different ones, I'm like, wow. People think about all kind of stuff.
I go with the ones that are rooted in a little bit of reality. You know, like now when people
living underground, that feels real.
100%. I mean, people have bunkers.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah,
I was like, yeah.
Trust me, out in that Midwest, ain't no telling what the hell's going on.
And in the
there.
Southwest too.
That's the thing. America too big. We talked about this last season. We've got to get this country narrowed down.
We have to. We must.
Too much going on border to border.
Yeah. Another thing about the PAIGC is how they were trained, right? And so, they weren't just out of nowhere suddenly guerrilla warfare fighters.
Right.
Obviously, they were trained. And again, so much of the countries were peasants and farmers. Once these folks kind of joined the organization, they were able to get training. There's some of them that went to guerrilla warfare training in communist China. Some of them went to Cuba to get trained. Some were trained in Czechoslovakia. Ooh, that was a struggle.
You did it.
And other places, but these were countries that were under some sort of philosophy, ideology of communism or socialism. And so this is where the folks really got trained during those kind of early years. And again, within 6 years of this party being built, they had covered 2/3 of the country. Before the organization existed, there were only 45 schools across the country. I mean, during this time, I don't know when it kind of ended, but by the time they really got rolling around building up these schools, it took it from 45 schools to 159 schools across the country. There were only 45 teachers. That means that the Portuguese actually only set up one teacher per school. Through the revolution, there were 230 teachers. They helped to grow the literacy rate of children and adults. Again, at this time, 95% of the country was illiterate. So really took the time to build these schools and grow the literacy rate. They believed in the education and the liberation of women again. And so some women were even sent to the Soviet Union to learn how to read, to receive medical education, to come back and provide medical services, both to the soldiers, but also to the people in the towns, because people were also being impacted by the war that was happening. Nobody was safe. Kids are experiencing gunshot wounds. People's body parts are being amputated. So they needed a lot more medically trained people in the country.
Because the Portuguese were utilizing chemical warfare against them. In addition to the brutality of shootings and bombings, they were actually deploying chemical things, herbicides, to once again starve them out. And I think he said at one point there was like one doctor per 45,000 people.
Yeah.
And that the infant mortality rate, like, it was an astronomical number. Like maybe 40 to 50% of children did not reach the age of 1. And so it was a massive effort to bring like medical technology to the peasant areas, vaccination, and to, like say, having to build that infrastructure out. And so when we talk about building a revolution here or anywhere, like I say, going back to, it's not just the fight. It is about literacy. It is about health services. So if you are out there and you're like, how can I be revolutionary? But you don't know nothing to do with an AK-47 or a switch. That's okay.
Yeah.
Everyone doesn't need the gun.
Yeah.
Get these babies together. Get the adults together. Make sure they literate. First of all, the children will be easier to teach literacy to. They're a little bit younger. Make sure that the people in your community can read, can write, can understand, have basic medical knowledge, that they're getting the vaccinations. All of these things are very important in building up a people who can survive whatever is to come.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Make sure everybody got a go bag.
All right.
We talked about them go bags.
Back to the go bag from season 1. One woman fighter that I read about in this book called Elite Capture. It's called Elite Capture: How the Powerful Took Over Identity Politics and Everything Else, by Olufemi Taiwo. Okay, I might have fucked up his name, but he wrote a really, really dope book. It's called Elite Capture, but a part of it, he talks about the revolution of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. He highlights this one woman named Amilcar Cabral of Cape Verde, and she grew up more middle class than a lot of Cape Verdeans. She grew up on a small island, and that particular small island that she grew up on was the island that housed the prison. And specifically, this was the prison for the political rebels and the anti-fascists and the mutinous soldiers across the Portuguese kind of colonies and country. So it wasn't just folks from that particular area. It was also people from Portugal. And so she lived in this small island that housed this prison. At some point in her childhood, there was a white couple from Portugal that were coming to Cape Verde, to the island, to visit their son, who was an anti-fascist from Portugal and had been from Lisbon. They wasn't from Lisbon. They was from Porto, and he had been locked up in this prison. So this white couple ended up staying with her and her family while they were visiting their son, and they stayed in touch with these Portuguese people. And at some point, Lilica was given the opportunity to go to college in Lisbon. And this same couple whose son was locked up actually supported her when she got to Lisbon and essentially kind of became a second family to her. And she ended up building her own relationship with the anti-fascist son that was imprisoned. He ended up being transferred from the prison in Cape Verde to a prison in Portugal. And so she was able to visit him. And again, because there were many other rebels, anti-fascists, communists, soldiers that didn't want to fight in the Portuguese army anymore, were all, in prison, she was able to be connected to them as well. So she ended up getting connected to the Portuguese Communist Party and the rebels. And eventually, in the same way that Cabral was connected to other students from these other African nations, so was she. She was connected to other student fighters and rebels from Angola, from Guinea-Bissau, and from Mozambique. And so she decided her and her man, who was also from Guinea-Bissau, and some other student fighters, decided that they were going to drop out of school and use their education to fight for the independence of their country. They all basically took a trek across the continent to try to get to Germany. And during that time, they had to cross through Spain. They were caught in Spain and put into the Spanish prison. Through some advocacy, they were able to get out and carry on through with their journey. They ended up making it to Germany, which once they arrived in Germany, there was a plane from Kwame Nkrumah waiting for them to get them back home to Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau and join the fight for the liberation of their people. And so again, just like so many ways that other African countries supported the independence of their people, really trying to practice this global solidarity, this African unity in real time. And she went on to be a fighter in the PAIGC, and also helped to build the education system after they won their independence. And so just thinking about both Cabral and this soldier Lilica using the opportunities that was given to them as people of a different class. They weren't really part of the peasant class. Yeah. They were part of the class of people that was able to get higher education, and they used that to bring people with them. to bring that back, which would have would be considered a class traitor in the best ways possible.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring her up because there's so many women fighters. There's other names that kind of came up when I was doing some research, many others, just to emphasize that sometimes I think the role of soldiers and rebels is so tied to masculinity and so tied to men, and that throughout history we have to uplift the women, the women
Always
organizations
there.
that are behind this.
Yeah.
That actually help to make this absolutely possible.
And to really understand the revolutionary potential at universities, which is why we saw those crackdowns under the Biden administration when people started protesting the genocide in Palestine.
Exactly.
To pretty much subdue the students on campuses. Because that is where, if you study across, like whether it's the Black Panthers, who in Bobby Seale, like a lot of people meet at these universities. And that's where they are radicalized, even though the administration is quite the opposite. All these connections are forged that can literally lead to people who are a part of national liberation struggles. So that's why we got to invest in our children.
That's why we got to invest in children. We got to stop.
We cannot be anti-children.
We got to stop the anti-children sentiment. And that, like, the things that lead to resistance organizations, that lead to some of what happened, the response from the students across the country around Palestine, is that sometimes we assume that these things would be more possible if within HBCUs, for instance. They're like, oh, that's, the white people have to deal with that. We don't have those kind of things happening to HBCUs. But really, the administration at HBCUs can be even more regressive in some ways towards student organizing, student protests, students trying to actually hold the university accountable to the values that they say they're about. Because so much of the HBCUs are ran and led by capitalism.
Uncle Tom's, Coons, the Coon Apocalypse.
Led by, the bourgeoisie.
Yeah.
That just want black people to be rich.
Yeah.
And if we are rich, we don't have nothing to worry about. And that literally doesn't make any sense. And
that's going to be one of our biggest fights here in America as we talk about having some type of revolution. Is that there is that middle class that we'll have to fight them just as hard as the Klingon.
Because they think they got some shit to hold on to.
They've got skin in the game. They don't want to lose anything. And so I think, Cabral talked about what was actually a benefit for them is that so many people in the country were not townspeople, city people, and they were still very much even if they lived in the city, they had rural land, they still were like first generation. Maybe they had been there for 10 years, you know?
Right.
And so it was a bit easier to get these people to see like what stake they had in the revolution.
Because the conditions had them like they had nothing to lose.
They didn't. He said actually
everything to gain.
He said actually the city, he said going into the peasant areas and trying to tell them like y'all are being oppressed. They were like, what? He was like, because comparison actually, the power of comparison helps people realize their conditions.
Yeah.
He's like, you're going in these poor rural peasant areas. They knew that their life was hard, but they didn't really have anything to compare it to.
Yeah.
But they actually had success by going to the people in the cities because they were, starting to become wage earners. And they could say like, wait a minute, I'm getting paid, $5 for this job and the Portuguese person is getting paid $30.
Yeah.
And so they were like, they could see the exploitation more clearly and they were able to be radicalized in that way. Obviously, in the United States, we've had a couple of decades of Black people and other minority and marginalized groups being able to obtain a level of wealth and comfort.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a little bit harder to get them to like see what they need to give up.
Yeah.
And to say, because some of them like, I get paid just as much as him, or I got white people working under me, and and it's like, oh man,
right.
yeah. So much different dynamics. We're gonna have a different struggle here.
Yeah,
for sure.
We definitely are. I mean, just the power of capitalism and individualism.
Yeah.
I mean, and the consumerism of the United States really leads us to believe that we have stuff. And we don't have nothing.
We don't.
And people will fight you tooth and nail.
Yeah. The conditions definitely, when people say like, y'all ready for a revolution? Not quite.
No.
The conditions here have to deteriorate a lot more.
Way more. Like Production would have to stop.
People are going to have to feel hunger in their bellies for the first time and for like consecutive days, nights, weeks, months.
Yeah.
Until people start dropping off a couple pounds, until we get a little skinnier.
Looking a little gaunt.
A little flushed. No cosmetics, no Neutrogena, no
access.
No access to Ulta.
No access and no access. No access to Ulta.
Once again, the conditions have to be ripe for guerrilla warfare.
Yeah. I'm like, what's going to be the tipping point? What you think is going to be I wish it would be something as small as like, you can't get no more burrito bowls from Chipotle.
What is it gonna be?
Would that be the spark?
What is the spark? No brunches. No brunches. No
brunch
lunches.
might cause a little bit of ruckus.
No, honestly, cut the Wi-Fi. Boy, you can get the people out of the streets today.
They
cut them cell towers. Oh my God.
Yeah.
The streets are going to be flooded.
Yeah.
Me too. I'm like, hey, phone waving in the air. Well, hey. Well, I guess the revolution is here. We ain't getting them phones back. Put the phone down.
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah, no, trust me, China and them, that's precisely what they're working on. They're going to hit that switch and say, watch this.
Wait.
Clear. Oh boy, look at the dots. Look at the dots moving. Watch them collapse from within. China's got their finger on that switch.
Got to.
But China, please no. Come get me.
I'm gonna be outside waving my arms.
Please.
Come put me on assignment. I'll be happy to go.
I'm not proud to be an American. I'm not. I never was. Check my social media.
No, for real.
For real.
No, for real.
Come get me. Y'all know we unhappy here. Y'all know.
Help us out.
Yeah, that'll be conditions have to, going back to it. Cabral understood that the conditions dictate the revolution.
Yes.
And so we have to have keen analysis of who we are and what we're up against.
Yes. One of my favorite quotes by Cabral is, "Tell no lies, expose lies whenever they are told, mask no difficulties, mistakes, or failures, and claim no easy victories."
I love it. He was precise. Y'all have to go read him.
The king, a real king, first of all.
That's a black king.
That's a black king. And he kept the main thing the main thing.
I'm going to have to have Didi link specifically this Q&A he was a part of. But I'm talking about he was swatting questions that was irrelevant. Mm-hmm. Somebody was like, well, what if you get into negotiations with the Portuguese and they say like, you can advance the independence of Guinea-Bissau, but you might have to leave Cape Verde off the table. Mm-hmm. He was pretty much like, why would I discuss that with you? The Portuguese haven't asked me that yet.
Right.
When they ask me, I'll give my answer, but I wouldn't give my answer to a question, expose, my willingness in certain negotiations to you.
Yeah.
And the Portuguese haven't even asked me yet. That's not how negotiations work.
Right.
And so it was a lot of stuff. They were like, are you Marxist Leninist? He said, baby, I'm in this struggle. He said, you can definitely label me what you want. He definitely studied and appreciated what Marx and Lenin, but he was like, yeah, I'm focused on this struggle for Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. That's all. Next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like many of our heroes, they're not actually able to see the victories that they fought so diligently for. Right before Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde gained their independence from the Portuguese, he was assassinated. It was essentially a setup. He was just about to form the People's Assembly that was going to kind of determine what was the independence of Guinea-Bissau going to look like. In the beginning of that following year, he was gunned down while on his way home.
He gave a speech. He was assassinated on January 20th. He gave a speech on New Year's Day saying, like, this year is going to be one of the most important years in our struggle, that we have to amp up, really, as far as the military fight, hitting them with blow after blow after blow and really weakening them and decapitating their military power here in the country.
Yeah.
And he was talking about building up the National Assembly. They were working on a constitution. So really, when he was just at a very pivotal moment in establishing the full independence of the country is, of course, when he was assassinated.
I mean, it's hard. I can't even owe all of the work to Cabral, obviously. And I imagine he wouldn't want us to, right? Like, he was the leader of the organization at that time, but really, really the independence was gained by the people of that country. The ordinary, the peasants, the illiterate, the farmers, the electricians, the Portuguese army deserters, the carpenters. These were regular people that all they had was the diligence and the determination to fight for the independence and the dignity of their people. And so it's something that should be studied even more. The PAIGC as an organization still exists to this day. Still are building the country that they dreamed of. I was able to go to Cape Verde. When was this?
2024.
2024. Yeah, like July 2024. I had never been there, and it was I was in Portugal already, and then I was like, let me try to do something different, and I was going solo, and it was like a quick and cheap flight from Portugal. I mean, from Lisbon specifically to Cape Verde, specifically this island called Sal, Sal, and it was beautiful. I mean, the landscape is like, when I landed, it was one of them times where I was like, where the fuck am I at in the world? Like, what is this place? I didn't expect it. I don't know what I thought I was going to see. It looked like Mad Max.
Oh.
Fury Road, bitch. Like, it was desertous. It was flat.
Wow.
It was just interesting. Like, it just looked like there wasn't like super tall buildings anywhere. The airport was pretty simple.
Yeah.
It was strange. But I mean, people were nice, and it's very Caribbean. It feels like the Caribbean, even though it's an African country. It feels like you're in the Caribbean. The food is very similar to what you would get in the Caribbean and stuff like that. So I stayed there for about a week. I wasn't on the mainland, which is where a lot of the Cabral history, the monument, the museums, and all of that stuff is. So I didn't actually get a chance to go there because it's not close. But beautiful people. I don't speak Portuguese, so the best I can do is like hi and thank you. That was about it. I was like obrigada. That's what I got. That's all I got for y'all. But so I didn't get a chance to like talk to too many people that are from there, but I would definitely go back. Yeah. So shout out to the Cape Verdeans. Shout out to the Guinea-Bissau people. Very, very liberatory people.
Yeah, learning about them has definitely given me so much more insight about being revolutionary. And what things you can hold on to, and like I say, obviously some things specifically belong to their struggle. But if you don't know about him, if you don't know about the organization, if you don't know about the history of these two countries, definitely would encourage you to study it. It may not be as well known as the Cuban Revolution, the Russian Revolution, and some of those things, but all of it is interconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank y'all so much for tuning in.
Yes. Get ready for Black History Month.
Get ready for Black History Month. We are really excited. We will be giving more Black history, some topics that we will be talking about. We're going to talk about love this month.
Yes.
I'm excited. We're going to talk about some love.
You know how the revolutionary baddies do. We could approach things from how y'all expect us to, or we could do it our way.
Yeah.
And so the Black History Month topics are going to be pulling us in different directions and exploring. Like I say, it's a Black history. That is a vast statement.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into it.
And we have an in-person Read and Yab coming up.
Yes.
Can't forget about that.
Read and Yab is going to be so good this time, y'all.
Yes.
Yeah. We had a very small group last time, which is how we want it. You know, we want this to be a very intimate setting. And we did The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. And now we are going into a few rules for predicting the future by our favorite
Octavia Butler.
Come on now. We ain't letting her go.
Yeah. So we will be having that. That will be on Saturday, February 7th.
Yes.
At Nuestro Barrio. For all of my Durham, North Carolina listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Mark your calendars.
Okay. Go
February 7th.
Go check us out.
We're going to talk about predicting the future. Why wouldn't you want to talk about that?
Because everything we learn about Black history is to equip us for the Black future.
Hello.
Duh, come on now.
But the baddies and the zaddies will be there, so come on out.
Yes.
RSV link coming soon. Please comment, like, share, subscribe, all the things to wherever you are listening to this podcast. Mm-hmm. We are also we're on all streaming, all of the platforms that you can listen to podcasts. So that's Amazon, Apple, Spotify. We're also on YouTube. All of our episodes are on Patreon. Please consider becoming a Patreon member.
Yes. And before we go, Dee Dee, what books did you bring? We got to go through our books real quick.
My bad.
Before we let them go.
Real quick. I already mentioned Elite Capture. So I have that. I have No Fist is Big Enough to Hide the Sky. The Liberation of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde from 1963 to 1974. And this is by Basil Davidson. And this kind of goes in really deep on the military guerrilla warfare aspect of the liberation fight. And then I have a book called Amilcar Cabral, A Political Life in Motion. And I got this book actually from Nuestro Barrio.
Oh, shout out to them. We love them.
Yeah.
I have Return to the Source, Selected Text of Amilcar Cabral. Look, I had to slow down my pronunciation. You know, my country ass will chop up a name.
You got it.
This has some of his last speeches and essays, including the one that he gave on New Year's Day, which was about 19-20 days before he was assassinated. I have with me I didn't really quite bring in the relevance, but I kind of did. But a book called Beneath the Lion's Gaze. I just finished it. It talks about the revolution in Ethiopia. And the reason that I brought it or thought about it as I studied this struggle in Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde is because it's a fictional tale of where one power is swapped out for another. Mm-hmm. And the dangers of seeing liberation come in your country via a military coup, and them motherfuckers get in and they're more repressive than anybody else. Mm-hmm. So it's a phenomenal book. I would just recommend it. And once again, talking about some of the complexities of revolution on the African continent.
Right.
And then I brought Richard Wright's Black Power. It's a collection of writings. But in there, he talks about how in Indonesia, they fought to get rid of the Dutch after 300 years of colonialism, and they did not have a plan. So once they got free, they did not do the Guinea-Bissau Cabral way. They did not have a plan for what their goals were around education, infrastructure, how to build their economy, how to regain a sense of national culture. Mm-hmm. They were kind of out there in the wind. And so he went there and he was doing all types of interviews with people. And
you said Indonesia?
Indonesia.
They black?
No.
What about Black Power?
He went there because of a conference, the first conference called the Bandung Conference that happened in the 1950s, where for the first time representatives from African nations and Asian nations met to discuss how to build political power post-colonialism.
Okay.
So he was like, all the black countries gonna be there, all the Asian countries, which represented billions of people,
right?
Multiple faiths.
Yeah.
And he read about it in a newspaper. He said, I gots to go. So he went there to see how these Asian and African countries, the only thing that they had in common, despite all these cultures, tribes, languages, religions, was that they were like, what do we do now that we have got the West out, or we're working to kick the West out of our countries? And so when he got there, he had to learn about Indonesia. He's like, so what's going on here? What y'all got going on? And he saw that a lot of people that he spoke to, they were like, we fought the Dutch off, and we're now,
here we are.
Now we're trying to figure it out, which emphasizes, once again, having that political organized structure is important before you just go to war. Get the books, then the guns.
Both of them.
Yeah. So both of those reasons, readings showed me, once again, there are a lot of complexities to being revolutionary. Absolutely. But first, you must be organized and clear on what you want and not just what you don't want.
Yeah.
That's the lesson.
That's the lesson. Thank y'all so much for tuning in and listening to us. We will be back for Black History Month.
Blacker than ever.
Look forward to seeing y'all.
'Cause I'm black, yeah.
I'm black, yeah. 'Cause I'm blacker than that, and I'm black, yeah. Thank y'all so much. Y'all have a good one. Talk to you soon.